I've drawn a basket on my watercolor paper. The way I did that was to create a vertical center line and then to draw a horizontal line where I wanted the top of my basket and another horizontal line where I wanted the bottom of my basket. I measured off the distance between here and here and made it the same as the distance between here and here, and I did the same at the bottom. Then I put a little tick here where I wanted the oval to be and another little tick here, both of them about the same distance from the midline. And I put a little roundish tick here and here, and then I just smoothed off the oval between them. While I was at it, I followed it with another oval representing the top rim of the basket. I drew a cross line here, and I put a tick up here, and then I used that to create the handle of the basket. Once that was finished, I drew 3 freehand arcs representing fruit. And now what I have to do is erase these lines down to barely visible, and then I can start. I've cleaned up the basket as best I can, and I've added the shadow of the handle, the basket, and this piece of fruit. I've decided that I want the light over my right shoulder, off to the right of the picture, and behind me, and that will cast the shadows this way. I'm shaking up a bottle of masking fluid, removing the cover, taking a cotton swab, and I'm going to use the cotton swab like a brush to mask out my fruit. It isn't important that I follow the lines because fruit itself isn't round, but I sort of want to follow the lines. I want to put it on very liberally because, one, I don't want it drying real fast before I'm finished, and number 2, I don't want any spaces. We need the fruit perfectly following all the lines. Now, I'm going to take a pencil and use it like a pen, and I'm going to make my corners sharp like a circle would be when it hits an arc. Finish off the other piece of fruit here. Masking fluid is safe to get on your hands. As a matter of fact, it's fun to get on your hands. Unless, of course, you have a latex allergy. But you don't want to get it on anything fibrous, like brushes or clothes. You'll never get it out. It just ruins them. Masking fluid is latex, the stuff that runs right out of a rubber tree. A good quality material is pigmented and stabilized so that it will last a long time. Down here at the bottom, I would love to feather this out, but that's not the way it's going to happen. Masking fluid is an all or nothing material. I'm pouring a little bit of gum arabic onto my palette, and I'm going to thin it down. I want it just below syrup. Gum arabic is the binder in all quality watercolors. It's actually the sap that comes from an acacia tree. And I'm going to paint the paper inside my lines where the basket's going to be. During this fast forward, I'll explain to you what this is about. Watercolor paper is sized. If there was no sizing in the paper, it would just be like water paper. You'd touch it with the watercolor, the paint would pull right into the paper, and it would never ever come out, and most of it would just disappear on you. The sizing makes a good watercolor paper a beautiful thing to paint on. But sometimes it's not enough. I'm going to take this gum arabic solution and really paint it liberally on the paper. The water's going to soften the sizing quite a bit. And this solution is going to sink into the paper and add an additional amount of sizing. Something that's semi-waterproof, but not really waterproof. If I really wanted to waterproof this, I would use acrylic medium instead. Anyway, once it's additionally sized, it's going to act like hot press paper. We're going to be able to paint it on, not as beautifully. It's going to smear just a little bit, but we will be able to erase it, and that's the goal here. The thing you have to watch for here is pencil lines. The gum arabic is pretty much going to seal them in, so you got to have them really light so that they don't show significantly in your final painting. Okay, everything's thoroughly dry. This thing even feels different than the rest of the paper. Now I'm going to paint the lit portion of the basket with my sedimentary yellow, which in this case is yellow ochre. Now I've started here, and I'm going to follow the lines now carefully. I'm following the lines because I want to paint in the same places I painted the gum arabic. It's not important to try to make a smooth wash or anything here. Smeary color is fine. We're just going to rework the whole thing anyway. I'm going to add some shadow right now. I'm going to use my sedimentary red, in this case burnt sienna, and I'm just going to go here. I want it dark. You'll understand later what I'm talking about, but since I've already figured out the shadow on the ground, then I need this right side of this shadow here to be just about where it is. Up here we need a shadow for the inside the same width as the one on the left on the outside. There's going to be some sort of a shadow under the lip of the basket here. I just want to suggest that for now. Just so I'll remember where it is, and see if I can't put this in a little more cleanly. I've got the shadow of the handle, so that's going to go over here. It's going to up about here, and then it's going to take over down around here. This is my opportunity to fix any errors in the width of this handle. I might have to redo that line a little later. It may just soften out. But this looks pretty good, and I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to paint some vertical posts on this basket. I have to get these things spaced out, so I'm going to put this one in first. It's pretty much vertical because it's pretty much in the center of the basket. Put the next one over here, and this one is somewhat smaller because it's a little bit away from us, and definitely more angled with the basket. We're going to need one. That's probably the biggest one. We'll put it right over here. Also pretty vertical because it's fairly front. And now we'll put one somewhat smaller coming back about here. Notice this one almost disappears. I'll use some thick paint, nearly straight paint, to paint this one in. Also angle. I also should put one or two in the back over here. Just suggesting them in would be good. We don't definitely need to prove they're there. One there, that's fine. Everything's dry now, and it's time to weave the basket. If you have a ton of experience, it might just as well go ahead and start weaving. But if you're not too confident, then why don't you just try this? Let's take this post and this post, and let's figure out 6 strands of basket weaving going through them. So I've got to make 6 roughly equidistant ticks. So here's one a little below middle. When you say that's a little below middle, and divide this into 3, and divide this into 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's close enough. And then I want to come over here. I want to skip one and do that again. So we'll put one down around here, here. That's 2, 3, 4, and we don't see the others. We don't need these others, and you'll see why in a little while. Now I'm going to take these ticks here, and I'm going to use them pretty much as the bottom of a fiber that's going over this post. So here I have a fiber that's going over the post, and what I want to do is erase a nice big thick area about halfway or maybe even a little bit bigger than the distance between the ticks. I'm going to go slowly, and I'm going to go patiently. The trick here is how much water is in the brush. You want it moist or damp, but you don't want it really wet, nor do you want it like a dry brush. I imagine we're going to do some fast forwarding in a little while. I don't think you need to see me weaving every one of these for you. I'm doing this upside down because the normal arc of my wrist will generate the fibers going in the way we would see them when we turn it right side up. The pencil line is laying on top of the paper and the medium, the gum arabic, so it's going to erase pretty easily if you encounter it with your brush. Everything's going to erase easily because it's sort of laying on top of the paper instead of in it. So far, we've got a pretty good illusion going. I'm going to actually widen these things a little bit and clean up the bottoms because I want to make sure that I have a lot of my post erased, that these things are pretty even. You notice I'm not so much picking up paint as pushing it around. I'm picking up a certain amount. I'm going to do this one now, same way. I'm going almost across to the next spans. Almost. And I'm using up a good part of the dimension allotted to me between the ticks for erasing. Of course, if you notice, I'm using my wrist to sort of give me a great big arc here. See, now this is the nice thing about this masking fluid. I could just ignore that. What about in between? This one you can see is going to come out of here and cross there. So I'm just going to use this line here from the center of here to the center of here, and I'm going to erase this one. I'm going to the center, and just create this strand. What I'm doing, I'm looking, let's say I start here, I'm looking at this space in here and saying, this strand is going to grow out of right there. And I'm saying it's going to grow out of right there. And then I'm just putting it in. I'm not worried about precision. One of the great things about baskets is that there is no precision. Baskets aren't made with precision, so you don't have to worry about that. Again, I'm going to clean this up a little bit better because there are areas of the post that haven't erased so well. The more gum arabic you put down, if you put down a few layers of it, this will go much easier. But after a while, it goes a little too easy, and it starts to look too mechanical. Now over here, I want to go in with a damp brush like before, but a dirty one now because we're in shadow. So I'm really not out to erase the vertical. That's necessary, but I'm not out to make it light like I was before. And I think I'm going to go back and do that again. And what you can do is you can take some darkish sort of color, and while everything is still damp, just putting a little bit on your brush, you can underline each of these strands because there will be a shadow below them. A shadow on the underside of each of these things. Oh my God, you've seen that? You may want to do this a little more as it dries, but it's kind of wet, so I'm being pretty conservative here. When it's a little less wet, I'll be a little less conservative. And you can go back over these things. If you want to do a little more erasing later, you can go back over them any number of times. If something's missing, just suggest it. Perfection isn't important. There's nothing perfect about baskets. And while I'm at it, I'm going to suggest some sort of uneven shadow under here. If you want to do more, you can do a lot more. If you want to stop here, well, that's good too. It certainly reads basket. People are going to think you spent months figuring out this thing and doing it, and it's really quite easy. I'm going to let it dry before I do the inside. I made a boo-boo up here. It's not really a big problem. I'm going to try to erase it, and I'm going to try to erase it like this. I'm just going to wet it, wet it, wet it, wet it, and then pick it up. Not bad. It's good enough. Now we're going to use that same technique to do the handle a little. I just need to know, see, I don't know how a basket is created. Never made a basket in my life, but I kind of figured that that's the way they go. How wrong can I be? I know somebody's going to send me a letter and say, boy, can you be wrong? And later I'll just add a little black mark or dark mark under these things to accentuate it, the same as I did here. I'm going to go around the top. Again, just suggesting something. I kid around, but the truth is that when I was developing this technique, I copied a lot of baskets. Kept them right in front of me. So even though I've never made a basket, I do know what they look like, but this one is an idealized basket. And now we'll get some darkness here. Too wet. I don't want this thing running all over the place. I want a fairly dry brush, and I'm just going to suggest a shadow on the dark side of these light sides. Just a suggestion of it. For two reasons. I don't want to get trapped admitting that I have no idea how to paint this thing, and maybe that's the only reason, who knows. I'm not painting here. I'm just going to try to take some of this loose paint off of my mask because I don't want to get it pushed around while I pick my mask up. And now with everything totally dry, you can use a pickup, you can use an eraser like this, or you can just use your hand. Sometimes you put a lot of this down, it really sticks, but it comes up just fine. One of the neat things is it leaves the paper underneath clean and substantially undamaged. If I were going to do the background, I might very well have masked this whole thing off, done the background, then done the fruit and put in the shadows. But since I'm planning on doing this as a vignette, which means without taking the painting to the edges, then this is the time to attack the fruit. And since the color is orange of everything we've got so far, I want to keep it in that family. I'm going for tomato. I'm going to start with some of my warm red. It's warm because it's off a little bit towards the orange, and orange is the warmest color there is. Orange here to make an orangish kind of red. And I think I'll attack this first one first, the big one first. I'm just going to paint in the kind of tomato color here. I don't have enough. It's not orange enough. Get a little aggressive. Paint it right in here. That's a fair color, except that there's a lot more orange than this in a tomato, but it's not even. I'm not going to try to make it even. I'm going to use my sedimentary red as a shadow color, and I'm going to use the same shadow pattern as I have on the basket. So it's a little bit over here and a lot over here. And a little bit out this way. I want to get kind of emphatic about my shadow too. A tomato might very well have some green in it. Not too much, a little bit. Maybe here. Maybe I'll blend that in just a little bit. And the tomato definitely would have a light reflecting area up towards the sun, like this. And maybe a very, very light spot actually reflecting the sun. I'll do the rest of this in the same way, only really, really, really fast, the way Captain Watercolor should. Okay, here's this object hanging in space. All we need to do is root it in the world, and we will have a basket attached to the world. Now, I'm choosing to use blue as a shadow color, but I'm going to keep this pretty realistic. So I'm going to neutralize the blue down ever so slightly with a little bit of this sedimentary red, the burnt sienna here. There's a blue shadow color. I'm also going to wet the area of my paper that I'm going to shadow. I'm going to wet it because I want a soft-edged shadow. The way to get soft edges is to paint onto damp paper. And of course, I only have to paint water where I plan to paint shadows. I want it nice and wet. I want the water to soak into the paper a bit so that it stays wet for the few minutes that it might take me to paint these shadows. But I don't want it so wet that the paint is propelled around the surface. I'll just wipe it dry now. The water's in the paper, some is anyway. I don't think I've got enough shadow there. I want to make sure that I have plenty of shadow color. There we go. Now, where does the shadow begin? It's going to begin right under the basket. It's not possible that this basket be so sharp-edged that it's going to not have a little space under it on the ground. So it's much more realistic if we put a shadow right under here. And though the shadow for this starts here, this thing too has a shadow underneath. And in fact, in real life, it's going to often be hard to tell where the shadow begins and the object ends. Let me just say that the lost edge in the shadow is one of the most important things in this whole lesson. I'm painting so tentatively and carefully. That's because there's so much goes into a lesson, and we're here at the end, and I don't want to lose it now. Normally, I would paint this quite quickly. As a matter of fact, normally, this entire painting would take about 15 minutes. Let's do a little fast forward here. Another advantage to wetting the paper first is that I get to join these shadows together along edges like this without having hard lines forming between them. Here's an almost always rule. The object that casts the shadow is darker than the shadow it casts. See how well that works here? I think we've created a pretty realistic image of a basket well anchored to the space that it's standing on.